Today I'm speaking with Dr. Henry Shevlin, a philosopher and AI ethicist. Dr. Shevlin is the Associate Director and Program Director at the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence. As a senior research associate, he's also published numerous influential papers on AI ethics, consciousness, cognitive science, and more. He's now a global voice that is examining the deep ethical implications of artificial intelligence. So welcome, Dr. Shevlin. It's really great to have you here.
Wonderful. Great to be here, Eben. And please call me Henry. That's great.
So you're a philosopher, you're an AI ethicist. Okay, so I mean, not to get into, make this a college class or anything, but what is philosophy? What is AI? What is ethics? Why did you find yourself, at the intersection of these amazing things?
Yeah. So what is philosophy is a gigantic question. I've even do a lecture for our new master's students on the AI ethics program, a 90-minute lecture, What is Philosophy? But to just kind of give you the Cliff Notes version, I would say that philosophy is really a set of methods as much as a single cohesive discipline. A wide variety of topics obviously get studied by philosophers, everything from the nature of beauty to the nature of time to the nature of ideal governments and political systems. But my specific area of philosophy is what's sometimes called philosophy of cognitive science. So working very closely with the results coming out of different empirical disciplines, different areas of science like neuroscience, psychology, behavior, computer science, and trying to do some theoretical work to make sense of those results. So to give an example of a question that I think a lot of people have been asking recently that falls squarely within my wheelhouse, if you want to address a question like, does ChatGPT understand? Can it engage in reasoning? So these are the kind of classic questions about that fall within philosophy of cognitive science.
Mm-hmm. And what about AI and ethics? And I mean, I'm looking for the cliff notes on all these. And what is the intersection of these three things?
So AI ethics is an emerging field, an emerging interdisciplinary field that draws on everyone from lawyers to sociologists to philosophers. And it's basically, I think, in a nutshell, about trying to get AI right, trying to ensure that AI tools are conducive to human thriving and don't cause unexpected catastrophes or contribute to political or social problems we already have. But it's a very broad church with people from a whole range of disciplines, as I say. At CFI, the Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence, where I'm based at Cambridge, we have a huge team of 40 researchers from at least a dozen, probably more different disciplines. And we're all kind of united under this banner of AI ethics.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What's the most interesting thing happening right now with AI, in your opinion? We were just talking right before we, switched on. What are the most interesting developments you're seeing right now?
So if I can answer first with a meta level reflection, which
Mm-hmm.
is this is AI, the field of AI as a whole is in a utterly bizarre and historically very unusual period of progress right now. I think, just to give a little example, we started our first AI ethics master's program back in 2021. And when we welcomed our students to that course, very few of them had even used any kind of AI tools because unless you're working at Amazon or Microsoft or Google back in 2021, you weren't directly using, there was no equivalent to ChatGPT or Stable Diffusion or Midjourney. Of course, people interacted with AI maybe without realizing it in simple things like content recommendation algorithms or the kind of products that Amazon was linking them, but they didn't use AI themselves.
They weren't like at the controls driving the machine. They didn't know. They didn't get a sense of the power. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, of course, by the end of when that cohort finished, it was the end of 2023 and ChatGPT had launched. And suddenly, hundreds of millions of people were using AI on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm.
And the speed at which new products have emerged since then, new generations of models, whole new applications of AI, this is just not a normal condition for any technology to be in. I've compared it to being at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, but the Industrial Revolution, if you look at historically, it played out over several decades and was quite slow in its early stages.
Hmm.
Even thinking back to a revolution, another revolution that I've lived through, the internet. It took quite a long time, from the 80s as a ARPANET, slowly diffusing out across different user bases. And it wasn't really until sort of the mid late 90s that a lot of people it became very normal for people to go online. So that was a
Hmm.
relatively slow revolution, although again quite fast by historical standards. What's happening now with AI is just completely historically unprecedented.
Yeah, yeah. My personal metaphor is Cambrian explosion. I remember reading a really interesting story by some research by a scientist who his theory was that it was vision and sight that triggered the Cambrian explosion, because all of a sudden you could see your prey and you could see your mates, and then there's like this all these new dimensions, and so it's as if there's all these new forms of intelligence that are like sprouting and turning into these meta entities. I don't even know what they are. In fact, I'm actually interested to understand, when you think of AI or generative AI, how do you hold it in your mind? What do you think of it as?
Yeah, so I think having these kind of frameworks is very important. And the most basic cut across different AI systems to try and carve up that space is, on the one hand, the kind of AI system we're familiar with through ChatGPT. You could think of this as the kind of human-like AI, typically using transformer architectures. And this is the kind of AI you can have a conversation with, the classic AI assistant. And in one recent paper, I've talked about this as anthropomimetic AI, which is a very fancy word, but basically
Mm,
meaning human-like, deliberately trying to be human-like.
mm,
And then sort of the other main category, I think if in this first pass categorization, would be the kind of systems that DeepMind, for example, in London are building, that use mainly deep reinforcement learning. And you can't have a conversation with them. You
mhm,
boot up an API if you want to do protein folding or search for different kinds of crystal structures. That was a model they built last year. And there are a whole bunch of tools like that that you can't talk to, but have powerful abilities to for design or material science and so forth. And I think these are two very different pillars, and neither of them are going to go away. I think
mhm,
we'll see these two different types of system developing in parallel for different use cases. So, in the case of anthropomimetic AI, the human-like ones like ChatGPT, there are just so many use cases that we're beginning to explore now where that is very much a core feature that you can talk to the model. I'm thinking of areas like education, where you want a tutor who can interact with you, one-on-one personal tutor. Um, a lot of healthcare contexts like first pass diagnostic medicine, um, or more generally, if you're building tools that you want a not particularly tech savvy employee or person in your organization to use. So the kind of tools that are
mhm,
being developed in law firms, for example, for paralegal work using AI. So that is a whole cluster of AI applications, AI use cases. And the other cluster is also not going away, of course. We're still seeing amazing new models being built for these much more specialized purposes, like protein folding or synthetic biology and so forth.
mhm, mhm. Do you think of them as entities? I mean, do you think of them as conscious? Like, when you're in your private mind, when you're sitting down with ChatGPT, how are you relating to it? Are you think of it as a computer or a database, or like, how are you holding it?
I think it's basically impossible to interact with ChatGPT without at least slipping into the fiction that you are dealing with a mind. It's
Hmm.
we have to adopt what the philosopher Daniel Dennett has called the intentional stance. Um, you can sort of force yourself to realize that at some level you're dealing with matrix multiplication or next token prediction, but it's very hard to keep that at the forefront of your imagination. I
Hmm.
think one interesting observation about humans as a species is that we are relentless anthropomorphizers. We
Yes.
routinely attribute mental states to things that don't really have them.
Hmm.
Um, one fun example. I have a real problem with hoarding, and I find it really hard to chuck stuff away. And I'm a big fan of Marie Kondo. And one little tip she gives is if you're struggling to get rid of something, you can just say thank you for your service, and that makes it a little bit easier to throw it away. So
Mm,
I use that tip all the time, and that's obviously a form of anthropomorphism. But I
mm,
think there's a distinction I would draw between what I would call ironic anthropomorphism, where you kind of know that it's not real, you're not really committing to the idea that the thing you're attributing mental states to, whether it's your car or some item you're throwing away or characters in a video game, they don't
mm.
really have minds. But it's just a
Yeah.
nice willing suspension disbelief. And
Yeah.
I'd contrast that with unironic anthropomorphism, which is where you sincerely, reflectively endorse the idea that the system you're interacting with does have mental states. And I think a
Mhm.
landmark event here, a real wake-up call for a whole bunch of people working in philosophy and cognitive science and AI was the Blake Lemoine incident. So this was
Mhm.
summer of 2022. I'm sure you're familiar. Uh, a Google employee named Blake Lemoine went public with claims that the Lambda model, which was the predecessor of the Gemini model, he said it was sentient. He had been convinced through his interactions with it that it was conscious, and even I think started to see about trying to obtain it legal representation. Now, I don't think that's probably true that the model is conscious. I think current AI systems are pretty poor consciousness candidates, but I think we also have to recognize that we're kind of fumbling in the dark a little bit here because we don't have anything like a consensus on the nature of consciousness. There
Mhm.
are as many theories of consciousness as there are consciousness researchers. I'm also a little bit pessimistic as someone who's done a lot of work in consciousness science. I'm a little bit pessimistic about the overall direction of the field. I think it doesn't seem like we're making progress on isolated questions here and there, but it doesn't seem like we're converging on a single consensus theory.
Yeah.
And I think so. I don't think we're going to get easy answers to these questions from consciousness science anytime soon.
Mhm.
In the absence of getting definitive answers from the scientists, I think it'll be interesting to see how much and in what ways people anthropomorphize AI, the degree to which
Mhm.
they really start to attribute the mental states, start attributing the consciousness, and so forth. And I think it's going to be a really strange period of human society as we start to do this more and more. And I think particularly as young people start to grow up interacting with AI buddies, AI
Mhm.
girlfriends, AI boyfriends, forming kind of new relationships with them, deep relationships. I think that is a generation that is probably going to go from the kind of unironic anthropomorphism that I think most of us do currently with ChatGPT to something that looks a lot more like unironic anthropomorphism, really treating these things as though they genuinely had mental states.
Mhm. So tell us what social AI is and what the field is and why you guys are interested in it, and then maybe share that story you shared with me earlier.
Yeah, so social AI is basically the collective name for the variety of different AI companion apps that are out there. These are may completely have missed the attention of your listeners, of your viewers, because they tend to be pretty niche products. Probably the most famous one, the one that gets the most press, is something called Replica with a K,
Mhm.
which is an AI girlfriend, AI boyfriend service. But there are dozens of these things out there, and a lot of different regional markets have their own versions. So, for example, in China, there's something called Xiao Ice, XIAO Ice, which wasn't developed strictly as a social AI in the first instance. It was a sort of a whole virtual personality, but they've now added a chatbot component to that. And according to one press release from the company, and I couldn't believe these numbers when I saw them. So I
Mhm.
think there might be some exaggeration going on, but it is an official claim that's been made. Xiao Ice has 500 million users, is what they claim.
Mm.
Even if
Wow.
it's just half of that, that's still a
Yeah.
huge user base.
No, it's
I think
huge.
Replica is has something somewhere around 16 million is the figure that I've seen quoted most recently. So a
Mhm.
lot smaller, but still a significant user base. And social AI is a very inadequately studied phenomenon at the moment. There are just a handful of papers of people who are seriously investigating this phenomenon. But it is already having some pretty serious effects. So we just saw today very sad news about a boy, a 14-year-old boy who was interacting with an AI companion I think he had made or using the character.ai service. Character.ai, obviously one of the big another one of the big social AI uh, providers. And a lawsuit is now being brought against Character.ai because this boy very sadly committed suicide, and it's been suggested, it's been alleged that it was his interactions with the system that helped trigger his decision to take his own life. And there was another similar incident last year. A Belgian man, married, father of two, he got into a really toxic sort of relationship with an AI companion using a service called ChatGPT, CHAI. And his widow said very clearly, if it hadn't been for his AI girlfriend and this toxic relationship they had, he would still be here today. So she attributed that firmly as the fault of the AI. Um, there's also a really spectacular incident. Christmas Day in 2021, a man showed up at the grounds of Windsor Castle, where the Queen was staying, with a crossbow, and was arrested and basically said, "I'm here to murder the Queen, assassinate the Queen." And he was deep in the throes of a whole bunch of delusions, but he was subsequently tried, and over the course of the trial, it emerged that this plan was the product of this bizarre relationship he had had with his social AI girlfriend, using the replica service. And if you read the sentencing notes, the judge is very clear, like this played a major role in driving you to attempt this bizarre plot. So there are some very serious effects that are happening from social AI. Um, but I also just think we don't know how common they are or what the effect on the average user is. So perhaps surprisingly, the sort of handful of papers that have been published looking at the impact of social AI on users have found they tend to produce benefits, or at least users report benefits to their mental health, to their relationships with other humans through using the apps. And although of course, we now have two confirmed cases where social AI may have been involved in suicides. There is also a study that quotes various users of people saying that this helped bring them back from the brink of feeling suicidal. So obviously, it's kind of hard to balance, kind of hard to know how many people social AI is helping versus how many it's harming, and that's an area where I think we urgently need to be doing some more research. I think there's the kind of quick elevator pitch for why I think this is so important is that social media has had so many consequences that were basically unanticipated, whether it's misinformation, political polarization, privacy breaches, manipulation, and so forth. And I think we can't afford to make the same mistakes with social AI, particularly if, as was the case with social media, young people are going to be at the forefront of this.
All right. So right now we're starting to see the rise in AI influencers, right? So what happens when we have AI influencers that are more attractive, more intelligent, more charming than humans, but then they're endorsing AI products or other products? I mean, this is your world a little bit, right? So what's going to happen here?
Yeah, so I think this is another area where currently we don't have clear legal guidelines in place or clear ethical frameworks to help us navigate this new frontier. So the simplest case I think is you're going to see this is in AI influencers, as you say, who might promote some kind of product. But just thinking about sort of one-to-one conversations that you might have with your social AI girlfriend, boyfriend, AI buddy, uh, if you're a young person, or for that matter, an old person, one of the things we like to talk about is products, right? We say, "Oh, I really am like the look of the new iPhone, but I'm currently on Android." So people are going to be having these conversations with AI systems, and the answers to the questions that the AIs give are likely to be potentially quite impactful on people's purchasing, but perhaps also more worryingly, you might think even in their politics. If someone asks their AI girlfriend, "What do you think of Joe Rogan or Jordan Peterson, or what do you think about Israel and Palestine?" There's going to be real, I think, potential impact there on people's beliefs and politics, and I think it's potentially a very powerful, source of leverage, of influence, and I don't think we have clear ethical principles in place to help us navigate that conundrum. How much can an AI system weigh in on political questions? How much can they endorse products? Should they be forced to reveal if they're getting any kickbacks, for example, from companies to promote individual products? So this is just like a taste of, I think, the
Yeah.
ethical issues. Another related phenomenon, we're also starting to see the rise of AI influencers or AI celebrities that are trained on the exact personalities of real celebrities. So there was a service, Karen AI, Caryn, launched last year by an Instagram influencer. So it was an AI trained up on all her social media utterances, so it acted like it was her, and users could pay a premium service to have sort of the girlfriend experience with this AI system. So people are monetizing their own digital identities. And I think that raises interesting questions about intellectual property. Should you require someone's consent to train a model on their public utterances, for example? Again, we just don't have a legal roadmap here to help us navigate.
Okay, quick action step here. So the key is learning how to prompt better. You start out prompting by just asking questions and talking to AI like it's a helper, but you quickly realize that getting better at prompting is a huge accelerator and game changer for your own success in life. So these prompts will not only help you get a lot more done faster and accelerate your success, but they'll also help you really get prompting and get better at it. You can get all of these as a gift from me just by going to metamind.co/gift. That's metamind.co/gift, and I'll put that link below, and then just opt in to get it. I've also created a powerful video for you called AI in the Future of Business and Work and Success that demonstrates some of the key mindsets and prompting strategies to help you get up to speed and get a lot more out of generative AI. And it's also included as a free gift when you register. So just head over to metamind.co/gift to get your AI Accelerator Prompt Pack and the other free goodies. All right, back to our interview. Yeah, so, when I go to Google and I search something, right, it started out, there was nothing at the top. It was just great quality search results. And then all of a sudden there was paid promotions. And then now it's like a whole page of, paid links at the top of Google. And my experience is once in a while, one of the paid links is the best search result, but there's a fascinating conundrum there, right? Google is like they built the system, they built the algorithm, they built the technology to get you the best quality results, but then they made it so that you can buy your way to the top. Now, if you take this to, a super intelligent digital mind and they're interacting with you real time, on YouTube, for example, with one of my accounts, I pay them the $10 a month or whatever so that I don't see the ads. But then when I'm over on my other account and I'm watching YouTube and I see the ads, it's a completely different experience. I mean, it's totally different to see all these targeted ads to me. But what happens when that's all invisible? Like, do you pay $20 a month so it doesn't sell you a whole bunch of stuff using super intelligence, and the one that you do pay $20 a month for, does it refer you to better, higher quality things? Like, how does this work? I mean, does it become your friend? Does it say, I'm mad at you, I'm not going to talk to you unless you buy some of these products? A lot of thorny issues here.
Absolutely. So one of the most common questions I'm asked when I go to companies and talk about large language models is people want to know how you do SEO for ChatGPT. And currently, there is no good way to ensure that if someone asks a model about your organization, that you can have your talking points featured there. I think that is something companies are going to navigate, and I'll probably find ways of monetizing, allowing companies to, for example, provide the answers to certain queries or have influence on them. But I think we're still not at that stage yet of that being a well worked out business model. I think more broadly, the phenomenon you're describing, where Google search results have become perhaps less useful, partly as a result of all the paid promoted content, but also just as a result of the world getting really good at SEO. I think things are going to get a lot more chaotic, mainly because I think we're going to see over the next couple of years, even we're going to see an increasing number of AI agents making content online. So right now,
Yes.
if you go onto Reddit, for example, which is one of my favorite resources, if I'm trying to follow the news or trying to do tech support or whatever, you're still dealing mostly with humans. And of course, we have had bots on Reddit and Twitter as a problem for a while, but once these things get really sophisticated and are increasingly capable of taking actions in the world, capable of uh, generating content, posting it fluidly, engaging in a more nuanced ways with different kinds of commentators, I think the amount of AI generated content out there is just going to swamp human generated content. There's this theory from sort of 2014-ish, I think, called the dead internet theory that said that there are basically way more bots on the internet than we realize. I think probably that was jumping the gun, but I think the internet is going to be headed for that. We are going to be
Mm-hmm.
in a sea of AI generated content, and probably we will need something like an AI PA, an AI assistant, to help us navigate that. To, for example, give us the help curate our feeds for us, help sift out the various kinds of phishing attacks or scams and so forth from that sea of content.
Yeah. And how do you do that when, again, it's a lot more intelligent, a lot faster, a lot more in control of these systems? So you mentioned that you get called in by companies to do kind of high level teaching them what AI is, upskilling, and so forth. I just read not too long ago that I think it's 77% of people who are using AI at work are saying that it's reducing their productivity. I don't know if you saw that one. I just find that to be completely fascinating, like how you would use this to reduce your productivity and the fact that most people are having that experience. I mean, I understand, sure, all of a sudden you sit down and there's infinite options. There's like all of this deluge of potential value that you could be creating. It's a little bit overwhelming. So first of all, what do you think about AI and productivity and this idea that most people are thinking it's reducing their productivity? And then what are companies, calling you in for? What are they asking you? What's going on in that world?
So I think I've seen in both my own life and in the lives of friends ways in which ChatGPT can just massively amplify the amount that you can do. I
Yeah.
think in my own case, I feel it's dramatically increased my productivity. Everything from the amount of time required to research and prep classes or write articles, or even just simple stuff like improving my ability to do fancy stuff on Google Sheets or Excel. In so many areas, I think it's just been a massive productivity goldmine for me. But I also understand why a lot of people might be finding it a distraction or a nuisance. I think one of the most common problems I run into is that people basically think that ChatGPT should work straight out the gate. You should be able to ask it whatever you want and get a perfect answer straight away. And there's maybe not as much awareness as there could be or should be that there is a real skill curve to using any kind of generative AI tool. And the more time you spend interacting with the system, the better your prompting will be. And also the kinds of queries you decide it to bring to an AI. So, for example, hallucination is something that people talk about a lot as a problem. And I have colleagues who say, "Oh, I can't use it. The rates of hallucination are super high." And I can say in my own case, I almost never run into hallucinations these days. And I think it's mainly because I don't ask the kinds of questions where I know hallucination is likely. So the AI sort of trained me to to ask about the kind of areas just where where I'm pretty confident I'll get correct answers. So I think that's one of the things that companies maybe are struggling with is getting the upskilling in the use of these tools for their employees. And I think a lot of people in companies, a lot of employees feel understandably, oh, great, here's another tool that I have to learn how to use. And I think that one of the best pieces of advice I could give anyone is find a non-professional use case for generative AI. So in my own
Mhm.
case, I run a D&D campaign for a whole bunch of friends, and a good 30 to 40% of the time I spend with ChatGPT is just using it to produce images for my campaigns or using it to produce backstories of NPCs and so forth.
So just quick question then. How do you prompt so that it acts like it's on Adderall rather than LSD? I guess is the real question we're asking. How do you prompt in a way that makes it not hallucinate?
So there's a whole complex skill set
Yeah.
here. I know companies, different organizations are now running whole dedicated classes on crafting better prompts. I think it's the kind of thing that you really just learn through experience.
Hmm.
I think custom instructions are very powerful, and so this is a feature in ChatGPT that, again, a surprising number of users I think are unaware of, where you can basically append to all prompts a description of the kind of personality, the kind of role you want it to adopt. So my custom instructions are at this point, a work in progress that I've been fiddling with and tweaking for going on a year and a half now. So that's one of the tools, fiddling with the custom instructions, getting those right.
Hmm.
Also, I think something that took me a while to realize is very often it can be useful to ask ChatGPT or Claude what information would be helpful for it to know before it gives you the answer to a question. So, for example, if
Excellent.
you're putting together a new diet plan, don't just say, I want a diet plan, or just give it a whole bunch of information and say, give me a diet plan. Say, okay, here's some information about the kind of diet plan I'm looking for. What would it be helpful for you to know before you come up with a proper diet plan for me?
So by the way, I agree with you. Using generative AI across your whole life is how you, kind of bolt it on or use it as a, yeah. So what are some examples of this?
So for me, one of the most enjoyable ways I use ChatGPT is just whenever I'm on a long car journey by myself, I just, stick it on speakerphone and will have a good chit chat and talk
Yeah.
talk to it for potentially 2 hours on the road. Whether it's me asking questions about Roman history or the history of disco music, or even doing fun stuff like getting it to give me quizzes, or sometimes maybe more professionally, if I'm going to a conference, for example, I might give a quick version of my presentation and see if it has any recommendations for feedback. And I think this the voice functionality of ChatGPT really is an important part of the user experience for me. And I think whilst a lot of people might think of it as just a gimmick, it really does change your experience and makes it available to, I think, users who would not otherwise perhaps interact with ChatGPT. So I think of my dad here. He's 79 years old. I remember back in November 2022 when I showed him ChatGPT. He's like, "Oh, that's cool. I probably am not going to use it, but yeah, seems cool." And then about 9 months later, when they released just the first basic version of ChatGPT's voice functionality, I showed him that, and he said, "This is going to change my life." And I set him
Yeah.
up with an account, and he claims that he's spoken to ChatGPT every day
Mm,
since then. He calls it Alan after Alan Turing, and
mm,
I think a lot of the time he's when he's had a few beers, he'll just sort of say, "Hey, Alan, let's have a good debate," and he'll pick a topic and they'll find something to argue about. And of
mm,
course, I don't think he would be doing that in text format, but voice really, really is a game changer for him.
mm. Wow, that's really beautiful. All right, doctor. Does this thing eventually wake up? Does it become sentient? Does it have self-awareness? Does it get agency? And I mean, kind of philosophically, does it really matter if it does? If it takes over and starts self-improving and taking over all the resources, and it's not actually self-aware, but it's on the way to, but it looks to us like it is, does that even matter? What do you think, philosopher?
Yeah, well, so I think the first thing to flag here is that cognitive science does not have any consensus definitions for pretty much any of the major mental state psychological concepts, whether we're talking about sentience, whether we're talking about reasoning, whether we're talking about creativity. These are all
Mhm.
massively contested ideas. So people confidently weighing in, saying, "Oh, ChatGPT really doesn't do reasoning," and giving the whole theory as to why. Well, it really depends on what we mean by reasoning. And as I said, there's no consensus definitions there.
Mhm.
So that, I think, is one thing to bear in mind when asking these questions about, about self-awareness and so forth. I also think it's important to separate out the questions about AI safety and recursive self-improvement, singularity type issues from consciousness. I don't think there's any reason to assume that only conscious AI would be threatening in the ways that people sometimes think of superintelligence as potentially threatening. In fact, I generally think that consciousness is a bit of a red herring in that whole debate. It doesn't matter if the AI is conscious, if it's either dangerous or not. And if it is conscious, that does have some relevance for other questions, which I'll come to in a second. But yeah, so I think separating off the singularity type worries from AI consciousness worries is quite important move in that debate. So as to whether these systems will display, well, it's interesting. You said self-awareness. I think for some theories of self-awareness or some forms of self-awareness, they already display this, right? So there was a really nice demonstration I saw of ChatGPT passing a version of the mirror test. So, the mirror test is a classic psychological experiment where you smear some paint on on a child's face, often like a little smear of red paint, and they see themselves in the mirror. And around, I think, 18 months, 2 years, human infants will reach up and wipe off the red paint.
Mm-hmm.
And people have now applied mirror self-recognition tests to a whole bunch of different animal species. And ChatGPT kind of passes a version of this. If you take a picture, a photograph of your chat with ChatGPT, upload it and say, what are we looking at here? At least some of the time, it will correctly say, "Oh, that looks like the dialogue window in which we're having this very conversation." So, on at least some soft notions of self-awareness, I think these systems already have a kind of self-awareness. Um, Additionally, these systems, I think, are surprisingly good at social cognition, reasoning about people's motivations. And I think this is something it's easy to miss or easy to underestimate, because a lot of people, I think, are still operating with something like the commanded data model of AI, where AI is going to be really good at maths and reasoning and so forth, but the kind of soft human emotional skills are going to be really challenging. But there's no real evidence that that's the case. A whole bunch of work and claims and counterclaims have been made about just how good current large language models are at social reasoning, but there are some really impressive results. So, for example, a group of researchers at Google, Winnie Street and her team, looked at multi-level theory of mind abilities in large language models. And multi-level theory of mind is cases where you're asked something like, you're given a story, a vignette, and you ask something like, does John believe that Brenda wants David to think that Allison doesn't like Ben? And humans are surprisingly good at this. We can usually deal pretty well up to about sort of five levels of it sort of embedded theory of mind. But surprisingly, GPT 4.0 is also really, really good at these and even beats humans once you get to 6 levels of embedded theory of mind. So I think lots of forms of social awareness and self-awareness, these systems already have it. But I'm still sort of skirting around the big question, which is, could there ever be anything it's like? Could it to be an AI system? Could they ever have subjective experience?
Mm-hmm.
And here I'm pretty pessimistic about our ability to answer that question in any kind of scientific, in any kind of robust scientific fashion. There are just so many basically metaphysical questions, metaphysical debates that are going to shift your answer. So, um, one major view about the nature of consciousness is that it's fundamentally bound up with living systems. So, sort of ipso facto, a system that wasn't alive couldn't be conscious. That's a view called biopsychism, has many prominent recent defenders. Other people defend a view about consciousness called illusionism, which says that consciousness doesn't really exist, or we're just tricked into thinking we're conscious. And there's just a whole variety of positions like that, wildly different positions that make fundamentally different claims about the distribution of consciousness in the world, of what consciousness is. And they've been dueling it out for thousands, or at least hundreds of years at this point. So I don't think we're going to resolve them in a way that tells us decisively if an AI system is conscious, which AI systems are conscious. Instead, I think that these debates are going to be largely resolved by the general public and via our deepening interactions with AI systems. So my prediction is that over the next 10, 15 years, human AI relationships, whether those are more kind of collegiate relationships or intimate relationships or friendships, are just going to become so much more profound, so much more dynamic, so much more sophisticated. It will be almost impossible for us not to mentalize, to anthropomorphize AI systems maybe in this ironic sense at first, but I think increasingly unironically. So while the philosophers and scientists are still arguing about whether the AI systems are conscious, I think a lot of people will just conclude implicitly that they are because of the kind of relationships they have with them.
Thank you for your time today. I've learned a lot. It's been very insightful. We'll put some links down below to your work, and thank you for coming.
Wonderful. Great being here. Thanks, Eben.
So thank you for watching another Metamind AI interview. Remember to keep practicing prompting, keep learning, get our prompt pack and quick start video, watch our other videos to learn from other AI experts, and stay tuned to us here on Metamind. Stay subscribed because this is going to get really interesting.